Welcome back. So today I'm joined with Sophie, a mum of two, a hair loss expert and business owner. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling today?
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, nervous and excited.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get you on. I think this is a topic that a lot of parents, whether you're male, female, whatever, will relate to, hair loss.
Yeah.
So this episode is going to be great. Let's just start from the beginning. I think if we can give a backstory to like your life, your partner, your children, and start from the very beginning.
Okay. Yeah, I met my partner first, and probably about a year in, I opened the clinic. So they do actually all really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And then I'd probably been open for about 4 years by the time I had my children.
Okay. And what made you go into your industry?
So my background was actually beauty therapy, and I'd left the industry and was really wanting to get back into it. I was doing something completely different, working at a gym, which is where I met my husband. And one of the treatments I offer, so low-level laser therapy, was one of the newest hair loss treatments that came to the UK. It was really big in the US. And my auntie has a aesthetics clinic in Liverpool, and she was one of the first people in the country to offer low-level laser therapy.
Oh, okay.
And I just sort of jumped on the idea of it being something really exciting and new. So it was a bit daunting because people didn't really have the belief that treatments like that would work because it was so new. But yeah, I just went all in. I actually started the business originally with a family member. And I think having somebody that's a little bit more head in the clouds and sort of like ready to give anything you go helped me take that leap.
Yeah.
But here we are 12 years later.
And so you started off with the low-level laser therapy.
Yes.
I know obviously you are trained in trichology, and I know you're doing some further studies now.
Yes.
What was your course like with that? Did you do that before having children or after?
Bits and pieces. So the initial training was actually just the low-level laser therapy because the beauty qualifications that I had let me access that training. But also it was hair loss consultancy that you did with it. And there was, training with the company that made the machines. So when I started off, although like technically I could give myself the title of like hair loss consultant, my knowledge probably was obviously nowhere near as in-depth as it is now, but it was enough to just get my foot in the door just to offer low-level laser therapy. And then from that, I've just added to it over the years.
Yeah.
So I studied with the Institute of Trichology. So that is purely focused on just the understanding of, it's the study of scalp and hair. Other courses I've done are things like phlebotomy. So that's so I can safely do blood draws, and that then accesses training for things like PRP.
Okay.
I actually trained in scalp micropigmentation, which is, like the scalp tattooing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the trainer is like a colleague and a really good friend of mine, and I've actually never taken over. She trained me, but I've always gone, one more client with you. And I think to get really good at that, you need to do it day in, day out.
Yeah.
So I just stick to the consultations. We went from laser therapy to working with hair transplant surgeons. That was next, actually. So I started, becoming affiliated with surgeons. They let me sit in on surgeries and gave me the knowledge and understanding of how you could understand if somebody is suitable for surgery, but also like how the surgery's done.
Yeah.
And then how you can support them with the pre and post-op care.
Well, that's really interesting that they let you sit in with that as well.
Yeah, probably in 12 years, I've sat in on about 10 surgeries. So they don't want you there all the time.
No.
But different opportunities have allowed me to. So for example, if we're filming surgery, for content to be able to show people what to expect in surgery. But at the beginning, it was just for my education. So some of the first surgeons I ever met, I'm so thankful to them because I don't actually book a lot of surgeries with them because they are at quite a high price point. But even now, I could message them and ask for guidance on something. They're really, really, really helpful.
Oh, that's nice.
So
going back to when you had your children, how did you find the transition from obviously just running your business to then being a business owner and a first-time mum? How did you find that?
Yeah, it was wild. If I'm honest, I feel like I should have been a lot more stressed because I was having my first baby, buying our first house, and then employing a member of staff for the first time, like a full-time member of staff, not just a part-timer. And then getting my head around the fact that I wasn't going to be there full time was crazy. But I think sometimes, when you have too many things going on at once, you don't panic about one thing. It was totally like that for me. I'm really, really lucky. So my husband is in a job so he's got the safe full-time employment that allows me to be that sort of let's just try things out. Let's just start a business and hope it works. And have to work all of the hours that are needed, like required by the business. Whereas he's home at 2:30 every day.
Oh, amazing.
So when I had my first son, I mean, I'm a control freak. So I worked right up until almost my due date. And I had my member of staff like shadowing me every day. Like what we were doing did not take two of us, but I would just be there all the time. And then when I was off, I think I took 6 weeks completely off. And then what I would do, obviously I was lucky that my husband was always home. And also like he has another son. So he was more than capable to be left on his own with the baby.
Yeah.
I think by the time I had my eldest, his son was 13.
Oh, okay. So you had good knowledge then.
Yeah, and he'd always had him a lot on his own. So, yeah, more than capable. So it meant that I would just go to work for like an hour. But it was a nightmare because I was breastfeeding. So I would feed, race out the door, drive to the marina, which at the time was like a 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
See like one patient and race home.
Stressful, isn't it?
It kind of was, but I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I thrive off that.
Yeah, I was the same.
Sometimes.
After I had Jude, I went back to work when he was 2 days old because you know what it's like when it's your baby, like not your actual baby, I mean your business baby.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't like let go of that because if I take a step back, I feel like it's all just going to go away.
It could go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I couldn't have had 9 months off.
No.
Because although maybe I could have trained someone to do consultations, but I feel like the consultation has to be me.
Yeah.
That's part of the business I've never
I think
let
people
up
buy
on.
into you though, don't they, as a brand?
Even more so now. Like even then I wasn't doing like videos online or anything. So they would just be seeing me for the first time in clinic. But now even more so because a lot of people do find me from social media platforms.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can tell when someone's at the door and they come through, if they found me on social media before I've even looked at their form, I know because the way they look at me as I'm answering the door is like they recognise me. Yeah. It's kind of like, oh, it is her. Okay. Yeah. I'm at the right place.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So, I couldn't have not gone in. So I was only going in for consultations. And then my member of staff would have been just seeing patients under the laser.
Okay.
And then hair transplant, we arrange all of that. I can do it remotely anyway.
Yeah.
So.
And what about, how long was your age gap between your boys?
So, 2 years and 3 months.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. And then my stepson, is 13 years older than my eldest as well.
Yeah, that's quite nice actually. I've got obviously pretty much that same age gap, 11 years. Now it's like she's like really hands-on and helpful, but at the beginning was that hard?
Imagine that's more with a daughter, not with a not
I don't know. I'm ripping my hair out with her at the moment, to be honest. Girls are... yeah. So, yeah, was that transition actually being a stepmom? How was that for you? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean... it's not something you ever prepare yourself for.
Yeah.
When you meet someone, you fall in love with them, if they've got a child, it's just something that happens. And I wouldn't say it's been plain sailing. He's 22 years old now, so if he sees this, he will know and he will agree. At times really difficult, but there's something really lovely about it as well. So he's actually got a son now, so I'm actually like a nanny.
Oh, wow.
I just feel like a bit of a fraud saying that because he's my stepson. So do I say step-nan? But
you've been in his life a very long time.
Yeah, he's 22, so longer than...
And also, that's a flex as well to say that you're a nan and you look like that. You look so young. But yeah, there you go.
It is crazy. It's crazy. But I love him like he's my blood. So, but yeah, the step parent thing was definitely challenging in the nicest way possible.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It does something. I don't know. You learn. What's the right word to explain it? There was lots of things I learned along the way that have definitely probably made me a better mum to my boys. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I'm thinking I had been with my husband, I think, for 5 years by the time I had my eldest. So 5 years of being, obviously you're not really a step parent at the start, are you? But, by the time we'd been together a year, we were living together and Taylor was living with us as well. So.
Oh, okay. So, very full on. Well, as you know my partner anyway, he doesn't have any kids, and like to me this sounds really horrible and I say this to him, if he had children I don't know how I would feel about it. I don't expect him to take mine on either. Like if he didn't want to, I'd be like, okay, that's fair enough.
It's a difficult dynamic. My husband is like so laid back and he goes with the flow. I do think it was maybe easier for me. I've got other friends that have been in similar situations. So he was a boy and he was already 8, so I think that made it easier. But I don't know. I feel like maybe people I know that have been a step parent and maybe they've come into it with maybe like a toddler daughter that needs more cuddles and are more clingy, or I don't know.
The age was probably a good age
I
to go in.
think so, yeah. And also I've never had to try and be like a mother figure. He's got a mum, and I've always gone in with the kind of mate angle.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's exactly what Harry does, actually.
Yeah,
he's more
exactly
like a friend to them both.
Yeah, and obviously you have to set boundaries sometimes and draw a line.
Yeah.
But I've got a stepmom who I absolutely hate. So I always wanted to make sure, I've always been really self-aware and wanting to make sure, number one, that I wasn't always there. Let him have time with his dad. Because I know what it's like when you just want to have time with your dad.
Yeah.
And to also, you don't have to try and be another parent, because they're never going to have that unconditional love for you. There obviously is love between us. It's been a long time, but it's not going to be that unconditional love. And I know that, like, say like one huge breakdown of trust or argument could stick. Whereas with your parent, 9 times out of 10, it's something you just bounce back from because you've got that deep unconditional love.
Yeah.
So I've always been really, really conscious of that. I think we've got a good balance. Like, there would have been times through his teenage years where he hated me because the rules were strict in our house, but
I've got that.
I think he gets it
with
now.
My own, so
I know. Yeah, it's really difficult getting the balance
hard,
right.
Yeah. So obviously going from 1 to 2 in just over 2 years. I know you had your eldest as well, but how did you find that as well with the clinic?
Okay.
Did you plan for your second pregnancy?
Yeah, both planned. I would have done it sooner, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I definitely would have.
Didn't feel ready at all. Like,
No,
after mine.
I definitely did. I had it in my head that I wanted to, and I kind of thought I wanted to do it closer together. I'm glad I didn't. The only reason we held back is I was having some investigations of like some scans I needed on my boobs. So there was like a cancer scare. So I actually would have done it sooner, but I'm so glad I didn't.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just was waiting to get through that. And I think the age gap is fine. I am so lucky. Like, I couldn't have my business if my husband didn't finish work, that early in the day, because it did mean that I always had my evenings.
Yeah.
So to go into work from like 4 till 8, not obviously when they were tiny, but once they did get older. But also like my in-laws. So his parents are always around. And my parents as well, but his in-laws, my in-laws, live around the corner.
Oh, amazing.
And they're so helpful. So they would do things like, if I wanted to go into work for half a day and baby was, like 2 months old, 3 months old, and I was still breastfeeding, they would drive to the marina with me, walk around with him in a pram. And then when I said I've got a gap, bring him to me so I could feed, and then go and walk around with him again.
That is good support.
So I was really lucky that they retired early, about the same time that I had my eldest.
Yeah.
And it just worked out perfectly. So I don't actually know if I'd have a business otherwise.
No. And how do the boys get on with that age gap?
Was in all 3?
Well, the younger 2 more so.
Oh, the younger 2, yeah. They do. Yeah, they constantly fight, not in a terrible way, but it's exhausting. Like the constant noise and asking them to leave each other alone is like, exhausting day to day, especially when you come in and you've had a day of back-to-back patients.
Yeah.
I walk in and I'm like, oh my God.
So overstimulation.
Yeah, overstimulation, 100%.
And
100%.
Your eldest, he gets on with them both, I'm imagining, because he's older. No?
Yeah, exactly that. So he's 22. He's obviously moved out a long time ago and he's got his own son. But yeah, when he comes round, he just runs around with them and winds them up in a great way. Like, they play football, they wrestle him, they charge after him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fine. But yeah, the younger 2, they are exhausting.
Yeah.
It is what I don't think you can expect any different from 2 young boys, though.
No, boys are, like, I think for me, I found my little girl really hard in the fact that she would tantrum. She still does that now. My boy's not like that, but you have to have eyes in the back of your head. He's just wild. And
turn around and they're on the windowsill.
Literally, yeah. Can't sit still while eating, always doing a backflip or something.
Yeah, God, my youngest in particular, he tries to do everything upside down.
Yeah.
So he will have his legs up here and his bum, and he'll be hanging off the sofa to watch TV.
Yeah.
We call him the backwards guy. He does everything upside down or backwards.
Oh, cute.
But yeah, they are full on.
Going back to the business side, so you started down at the marina.
Yes.
I think I remember, was it Saks down there?
Yeah, so, it was originally Saks. So, you went in the entrance and then you had the hair salon to the left and the beauty salon to the right.
Yeah.
But it was like a reception, and down the corridor, there were essentially just treatment rooms. So I just had a room inside there, and I was there for 8 years at the beginning. I only left there because, to be honest, I've been looking for my own premises for years, but nothing suitable really came up. It's really hard to get property in Brighton and Hove, and I've always been really picky. Like where I am now is like everything I manifested.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be a nice sort of area. You know, you drive up and the houses are beautiful. I wanted a small parade of shops because that means easy parking, which you don't get in Brighton, and at least 3 treatment rooms, which is what I have. So it is perfect. But essentially there it was a room. So whether I was in or a member of staff, we would have to just tag team using it at different times.
And so how long have you had your clinic open now, the one in Hove?
The one I'm in now has been open since December, so we're not even at a year yet.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I don't actually know how the business went on for that long with essentially a room. So I was at David Lloyd in lockdown. They closed the gym and my business could open after the first 3-month lockdown.
Yeah.
But David Lloyd couldn't open, so they wouldn't let us in the building. Oh. So I then temporarily moved my business to a wellbeing centre in Hangleton. So that was called The Space. So they do all sorts of like, wellbeing services, you know. So I ended up temporarily borrowing the room, staying there 3 years, and probably like at one point it definitely could have been permanent, but then this opportunity came up to take on this shop and I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for like 10 years.
It literally is such a beautiful clinic as well, what you've done with it. It's just
I love
amazing.
it.
Yeah.
I'm so happy being there. Like I walk around and I just love it. The decor, I can control the music. Like,
it's like a pinch me moment, I guess, like everything you've ever wanted.
Yeah, absolutely in my element.
So let's go into hair loss in general. Yes. So I think for a lot of listeners that are mums, I did some polls about like, how was your hair during pregnancy? How was it postpartum? A lot of people said that they had better hair during their pregnancy.
Yeah.
And then afterwards experienced a lot of shedding. And some of them are still experiencing that, including me, like 2-3 years down the line. Are you seeing a lot of that in clinic?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I won't go too deep into the science, but essentially when you're pregnant, due to the increase in your female hormone, so the estrogen, your hair follicles are not going to shed as often as they normally would. So I personally don't remember having that glowing masses of hair. I've got a finer natural hair type anyway, but a lot of people do notice that. So each hair follicle goes through a cycle, the hair growth cycle. So it's either growing, resting or shedding. So that growing part is extended due to the increase in estrogen. And then normally for most people, 3 or 4 months after you've given birth, the hormones are obviously adjusting. You get that drop. And then all of the hairs that should have shed in that whole, 9 months or so, kind of all come out at once. So it feels very excessive. And the problem that you then have is not everyone's hair growth just bounces back. Like our bodies are so depleted. If there's blood loss in labour, you could be nutrient deficient, you're not sleeping. There are so many reasons it can kind of trigger off other medical conditions. It just doesn't bounce back. So say like the textbook thing would be, the shedding has happened 3 or 4 months postpartum, and then you get this crazy wild regrowth within a couple of months after that. But the shedding can be really scary. Like you can see handfuls of it coming out. So I experienced an average amount of post-pregnancy hair loss with my first son, but with my second son, I lost about 2 litres of blood in labour. So I was really anemic.
Yeah.
So those two things combined. So being anemic on its own can cause, it's called telogen effluvium, but so can this postpartum hair loss.
Right.
So I lost probably a good third of my hair. I'll have to send you some pictures of like my hairline full on receded. And when it was tied up, you could literally see all through here. When my hair was down, there was just gaps everywhere. So even though by then I would have been open for about 6 years. So I know what's happening, why it's happening, what I can do to treat it. But it's still scary.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh my God, like how much hair am I going to lose before this stops and regrows? Because you can't really control that. When you're using hair loss treatment, you're trying to speed up the regrowth, but you can't stop that shed. It's almost like it's destined and has been set a few months ago. Like the follicles have had their instructions. So we're trying to reduce it, but it's more just speeding up the regrowth. And it's a really annoying phase to go through. So for me, my shedding was really excessive for a long time. I had loads of regrowth, but I was still shedding a lot as well. But it did take about 3 years for my eye levels to get back to where they should be.
It's the regrowth as well, isn't it? The baby hairs when you're putting your hair up or whatever.
I just remember
these.
I have the most brilliant picture that you can use. I mean, we'll have to just block out my face, but I literally almost like pulled them up, and it literally is like
I
this.
think I've got one like that as well.
horrendous. It's just not fair, is it? Like,
No.
you've had a baby, you're tired. You don't want to be looking like a crazy person that's been dragged through a bush, or to be having your scalp visible. If you've never had that before, it's really scary.
Yeah.
Like I say, I knew why it was happening, but I've got pictures of handfuls of hair coming out every day for months. And I knew why it was happening. It was still not nice for me even, so.
Can I ask as well, you know, like people say, oh, I'm trying not to wash my hair so much. Is that, to me, I feel like if I get a build-up, I tend to shed more than if I'd wash my hair. I do my hair every other day.
Yeah, every other day is perfect. Yeah, especially with the kind of products that I recommend. So, the whole not washing the hair, leaving the natural oils on the scalp is absolutely not what you want to do when you're treating hair loss.
Right.
We don't want that build up. It clogs the follicle. You get sebaceous plugs.
Right.
So every single day, whether someone says, oh no, I don't get an oily scalp, or my scalp's always clean. Like, no, your hair follicle has a sebaceous gland and it secretes oil every day. That's normal. So we've got like a skin biome. We have microorganisms all over our skin, and the purpose of this sebaceous gland, when it's secreting oil, it's secreting it at a slight acidic pH to not allow the microbiome to duplicate. These microorganisms can turn into like fungal infections and things. So it's secreting that at a certain pH to keep it under control.
Right.
So it's like your skin flora and keeping it balanced. So it's secreting it every day, whether you think you're getting oily scalp or not. And then what you've just said is, so the hairs are shedding daily anyway, but if you're only washing it once a week, they're kind of stuck in place. So then when you do wash it, they're all coming out at once.
Yeah.
Whereas I do meet a lot of patients that are obviously scared to wash their hair when it's shedding that much. But they do straight away notice if they just wash it every other day, or even every day if it's short enough and you're not heat styling. It is less, because it is less hair shedding every day. You're just not getting that huge build up. When we're treating hair loss, if we're applying anything topically, or we want it to be able to penetrate, if they're sat under the laser, we don't want 3 days of grease.
Yeah.
You know, providing a barrier.
And obviously I know you offer your treatments, and also for you that don't know, Sophie also owns a company called 360 Optimum Hair, which is a hair loss product range. So with postpartum, obviously if they're still breastfeeding, have they got to be a bit careful as to what they're having and what they're using? So they wouldn't
be taking the capsules.
Right.
You just give everything a wide berth. And actually there's something in there called saw palmetto, which is in there to kind of regulate the hormones. So women that are experiencing female pattern hair loss and male experiencing male pattern baldness, it's the elevated male hormones that are causing the hair to thin. Right. So just because it can have any potential effect on hormones, you just give it a wide berth. So not the capsules, but the shampoo, conditioner and the follicle treatment. Yeah, absolutely.
And what about the treatment in clinic? What would you recommend there?
So all of them, not hair loss medications.
Right.
But so if we have a temporary cause of hair loss, so, you know, things like a vitamin deficiency, post-pregnancy, post-trauma, so if someone's had like bariatric, like weight loss surgery, a car accident, somebody's died in their family, those kind of traumas, that can cause a telogen effluvium. So because it's a temporary cause of hair loss, you don't want to look at starting something that they have to be on for life, like a minoxidil, which is a type of hair loss medication. So lots of people will just see it on the shelf in Boots and they just grab it and start using like a Regain, or even Boots do their own brands these days. There's actually quite a few brands, but the follicle becomes reliant on it. So number one, if you're breastfeeding, it's a no-no anyway, because it gets into the bloodstream and it can lower your heart rate and blood pressure. So definitely not whilst breastfeeding. But even so, like if you start using it, the follicle becomes reliant on it. So this is like a temporary cause of hair loss, but then you've started something that really you can't come off. And if you do, you're likely to have a lot of shock hair loss as well.
Oh, okay.
So the options are, if I kind of go through them in order, you've got 360 Optimum hair products are the foundation. So you should be using a good quality shampoo and conditioner that's not going to accelerate the hair loss in any way or block the follicle or strip the scalp or wrap it in silicones and oils that don't allow it to breathe or let hydration in. There are natural growth stimulators in there. So the main one being the Capillia longa, and that's derived from the turmeric plant, so it's anti-inflammatory, it's hydrating. But in the clinical trials, it was shown that when applied to the scalp, it keeps the hair follicle in the growing phase for longer and then shedding for less time. So at this period of this postpartum hair loss, where the follicles are being instructed to all shed at once, we're instructing them to go back into the growing phase.
Right.
So it might need to see its way through. It might need to shed that hair that's already been destined to shed. but we're speeding up the regrowth. And then no one really knows if we can stop it from shedding if it's about to.
Yeah.
Like, it's really difficult for them to trial that. They trial it more on like a female pattern baldness because it's a little bit more predictive. But yeah, so that would be the entry point. So you're kind of washing your hair every other day. You're putting the follicle treatment on once a day. You kind of part the hair, massage it into the scalp, and you just leave it on. You style your hair as normal. It's not sticky or greasy or anything. If they want to do more than that, so this would either be that they've got the time and budget for it, they want results faster, or if the hair loss is super aggressive, like they've lost way more than an average amount of postpartum hair loss, we then have options with low-level laser therapy. So baby can't be with them, because when you sat under the laser, you can't look at the lasers. But, you know, there's no contraindication to having it even if you are breastfeeding, because it's just whilst you're under the laser.
Yeah.
What that's doing, when you're sat under that type of red light, it increases circulation to the scalp, triggers a higher release of something called ATP energy. And in simple terms, so every cell in our body has something called a mitochondria, and that's like the battery pack in the cell, if you like. ATP energy like charges the mitochondria, it powers the cell.
Okay.
So it will make any cell function more efficiently. So within the hair follicle, that just means that it produces more hair cells at a faster rate. It speeds up the mitosis and the division of the hair cells, essentially. So on top of the benefits we're already getting from the products, they're then sat under the laser and it's producing more hair cells faster. And then the other one would be PRP. So we offer something called Solenis PRP, which is 3 or 4 times the strength of a normal PRP. And in that treatment, we are taking a vial of the blood, like having a blood test. We separate the plasma in the centrifuge, so it spins it really fast at force to separate the components in the blood. And then we are using the platelets within the plasma and injecting that into the scalp, and that releases growth factors. And in short, those growth factors will grow more capillaries to the follicle, so the follicle actually has more of a blood supply, and it has a regenerative effect on the follicle. So again, it's instructing it to perform better effectively. So you can do all those things together. If you've got like time and budget, you know, money is no object, you've got all the time to do it, you can throw everything at it, because the nice thing about those treatments is when you stop them eventually, when the hair loss, you know, is under control and we've got your regrowth, stopping them does not cause more hair loss.
Yeah.
So that would always be the route I would go down.
Yeah, what you said there about the minoxidil, that's really interesting. And I know, because I do Sophie's social media through my other business, so I'm quite clued up on it now. I feel like I've learned a lot.
I know, you know so much. Yeah.
But I know rosemary oil is a big no-no. But
for most hair and scalp types. So there are some studies behind rosemary oil. I looked into all of this when we were deciding which growth stimulators were going to go into my products. You have to weigh up a few things, because there were some really interesting studies. It was only trialled alongside a 2% minoxidil. So most people wouldn't use a 2% minoxidil. They would use a 5, and they would use it twice a day. So it doesn't really compare to what you achieve with hair loss meds, but it has gone viral. It's cheap to make. The bottles of it are usually like £10-15. So products like that, like, because I've kind of looked into what could I add into the range to make a viral product, you know, but it's when you make good quality products with the right ingredients that are better for the hair and the scalp, you just can't make them that cheap.
No.
And although it does have some studies behind it, what I saw with the studies for Capilla longa like far exceeded it, like the actual stats when you look at it overall. But there's also the inconvenience of it. So rosemary oil is usually based in a carrier oil, so like a castor oil or almond oil or something like that. Really greasy in the hair.
It's quite thick, isn't it? Yeah.
And the problem with that, so number one, when people say, oh, I've been using rosemary oil and I've got all this growth, if they're applying it twice a week, it's not what was shown in the studies. They were applying it twice a day and it didn't show the results to 6 months.
Right.
So there's something that really annoys me when I see stuff online where someone's got, say, like an alopecia areata, which is a patch of hair that falls out, and they're applying oil and they're like, oh, it's regrown because of the oil. Like, no, those patches of hair loss regrow usually within 6 months anyway.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened because of the rosemary oil. Yes, maybe applying it could speed up the regrowth. But a lot of the stuff I see is stuff like that. And I'm like, that's not why the hair's regrown. You could say the same with post-pregnancy hair loss. So we're not saying that the regrowth has come from that. We're trying to speed it up. And sometimes if you don't do any hair loss treatment, if it's quite excessive or you've started with a finer hair type, it just doesn't bounce back.
Yeah.
Normally we kind of do blood work and we're like, okay, actually you're also anemic, or you've also got vitamin D deficiency or B12 deficiency. So all of these things play a part. So yeah, we just kind of judge it based on how advanced the hair loss is.
Yeah, okay. Right, let's talk about male hair loss. So I done a poll online and I said, like, if your partner's a male, do they struggle with being self-conscious because of hair loss? Mm-hmm. And there was like 90% of people that said yes, but when I went on to say, have they sought any treatment for it, it was like 10% said yes.
Yeah,
and the
crazy,
rest of them didn't.
Still, even to this day.
Yeah, and to me, it's crazy. But like my partner's had hair transplant this year, and I feel like men for a long time were a little bit like more secretive about it, I guess. They see it as like vain, don't they? Whereas us women have been having stuff done for years.
Yeah, exactly. And well, even some women are secret about it.
Yeah,
but
true.
The majority aren't, actually.
Yeah. No, I think it's more like, you know, you see people going to get their hair cut and they'd put up a salon photo. Now, if somebody's having their lips done, they're putting up a photo.
Yeah. So, if I'm getting my Botox,
yeah,
I video it.
I'm like that same. So
absolutely.
But men obviously have always been a little bit more like, you know, they talk about it behind closed doors.
Yeah, it's not always been deemed like acceptable for men to have treatments at all.
No, which I think is so silly, because it's like, if that's going to make you feel better, go and do it.
Honestly, the best part of the job is seeing men's confidence change. Yeah. Women's as well, but for the men, especially if they have kept it under wraps. So I will always try and relate to them. I will talk about, like, so I've had my nose done. So I will quite often, when men are trying to keep it a secret, I will usually say to them, look, I'm going to be honest with you. You know, I'll let them know that I've been through this surgery, and trying to keep something a secret for me was never going to work. So I'm patient facing. I took 1 week off work. So I was like, by the way, when you next see me, I'm going to have black eyes and a swollen face.
Yeah.
But I also feel with something like that, when you keep it a secret, you're holding this weight of like, who's going to find out?
Yeah.
And I will always suggest, if they're open to it, to just own it, because there's no dirty secret to find out then.
Yeah.
That's like part of the weight gone. People, if they're going to notice it, they're going to see it regardless. But if you've kept it a secret, it then becomes a bit of an elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So obviously it's up to them the way that they deal with it. But I've seen a huge shift in 12 years. So when I was first open, where I was in David Lloyd, people would like duck in, like literally like hat on. They'd have to go to David Lloyd reception and be like, oh, can I be buzzed through to the salon, please? And I definitely had, over the years, I can think of at least 4 or 5 people that didn't turn up for a consultation. They were like a no-show. And when they eventually made it in, they were just like, oh, yeah, so by the way, I did actually turn up. I just wasn't confident enough to be asked to be let in case they asked me what I was here for.
Oh, yeah. So that's really sad, actually.
It's a huge barrier.
Yeah, definitely. Are you seeing more men now, like, turning to, I think more so, like, hair transplants?
Yeah. Surgery is way more popular than it was 12 years ago. It's definitely built over the years. I think, number one, it's more normalised.
Yeah.
Number two, surgery is much more affordable now. So when I opened, we were talking £10,000 plus for surgery. And I would say when I was about 3 or 4 years in, a lot of people were starting to go to Turkey, but a lot of the outcomes were still really poor.
Yeah.
So there was this weird thing where some people would try and go for the cheaper option, which wasn't that cheap then. It was still 4 or 5 grand to go half price, go to Turkey, and coming back with not great results. And then there's been a bit of a shift. I would say 4 or 5 years ago, more and more surgeons are making their prices more affordable for like a numbers game. So, for example, the surgeons that I work with, you know, I've got my main partnered hair transplant company that I work with. So I'm like one of their original consultants. I've worked with them for the whole time they've been open. And then there are some surgeons that I work with directly. And kind of over the years, rather than being on Harley Street, for example, where their overheads are crazy high, or in a beautiful stately home in the middle of the countryside, they've moved on to like smaller high streets. And rather than them having to do the marketing, the consultation, me and the team have done all of that for them. They just turn up, 2 surgeries a day, done. So that has allowed us to get the pricing down over the years. Yeah. So for Istanbul, you're looking at, so it's £2,394 plus your flight. That is worth it if someone needs more than 3,000 grafts, so a large surgery. There's a bit of a saving to be had.
Yeah.
If they need under 3,000 grafts, there's no point, because the pricing could be, in the UK, depending on which surgeon, it could be 2,499 up to 2,994 max.
So even that is like a lot better than you'd expect,
Exactly.
isn't it?
And even if they need a larger one up to 5,000 grafts, then it's just under 3,700. So
Yeah.
that's like the maximum in the UK. Like, I do have other surgeons I can book with, but they are 7, 8, 9, 10,000 pounds. And for that reason, I just haven't booked with them for years. They're all amazing at what they do, but those kind of surgeons will just book in a surgery a day, and they've kind of got everything
covered
set.
their quota, haven't they? And I said to you when we were briefing this, I know that there's quite a common misconception. If somebody says, oh, I'm getting my hair done in Turkey, it's always like, oh, like, you know, even any surgeries, if you say you're going to Turkey, people turn their nose up at it.
They do. Yeah, they really do.
Like, I know, because obviously I've been doing your social media for a while, I know that the surgeons you use over there, they are in the most pristine hospitals. The accommodation is amazing. Everything is like
they do it
5-star.
so well out there. I mean, there is still dodgy clinics, of course. You know, there are still places that technicians are doing all of the surgery. You get really well-renowned clinics, actually, that even will offer packages where a technician's doing all of the surgery and the surgeon just oversees it. Their name's above the door. They do the consultation. So, like, that shouldn't go on.
No.
Like, it's so important that the surgeon has done the consultation, but also the incisions. There's 3 main parts to hair transplant surgery. So you've got extractions, where call them the donor grafts, are taken from the back, and they're relocated to an area that's gone bald or receded. So from the front of the hairline to the crown. So you're never going to thin or go bald on the back and the sides, because those hair follicles are not receptive to the male hormones that cause the hair to thin.
Right.
So it's called DHT, a male hormone that binds to receptors at the base of the follicles only across the top of the scalp. So that's why they're thinning. So when we take them from this area, we're taking them from here because they're not going to thin in the future.
Right.
So in surgery, we have the extractions. We then have the surgeon performing the incisions. So by doing so, they are controlling everything about the outcome of the surgery. You know, they're controlling the placement of the grafts, how far spaced apart they are, the hairline position, the direction of hair growth, and the angle of hair growth is something that all surgeons don't get right. I do see a lot of people that find me after they've had a hair transplant, and it's really sad when the angle's not right. If they were to have like a buzz cut, you know, all the hair's growing forwards and then you get a fringe that's growing up a little bit. Or some really terrible ones. I've had people contact me asking if we can fix like the temples growing upwards when all the hair's growing forwards.
Oh, no.
You can't do anything to correct that. The advice really is to grow it long and blow dry it down or put it into a style. It's really hard. You can't remove them because then you're creating scar tissue. And if you try and transplant back into scar tissue, the grafts aren't usually successful. Or it goes right down to like you expect 60-70% maximum to be successful. So it's really unfortunate. I've had someone contact me recently that had beard surgery. So obviously the beard hair should all grow in a downward motion and these are growing just forwards. The direction and the angle of the hair growth is everything on the outcome.
And I think as well, like having somebody UK based that you know you can trust, and as you can tell, guys, by hearing, Sophie really does know her stuff.
Such a geek.
Yeah, no, but it's so important to have that trust in you. Like I said, people buy into you as a person because you know your stuff. You're not going to send them somewhere where they're not going to have results.
No.
And even down to my partner having his transplant, he had it in a Harley Street in London.
Yeah, can we just have a moment while he hasn't booked it with me, actually?
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to be having words with him.
Yeah, you can, because I've been telling him as well.
He literally comes in the sinks in my clinic.
I think it's more he's like, oh, I don't want anyone to know. That was in the beginning.
True, or sometimes going somewhere where you know someone's already been as well. That's another thing.
Yeah, his friend had been there. But I will say, they haven't given him any aftercare.
I hear this all the time.
Yeah, he definitely paid over what you've quoted as well. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is what I'm going to go back and have this conversation.
Yeah, no, sometimes in the moment as well, you don't really think about it till after, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about.
Yeah.
You kind of don't associate the two things.
No, but I know obviously through working with you, people think hair transplant is just a one-off fix.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, no, this is a huge thing I talk about all the time. So if let's say the hairline's receded or the crown has gone bald, we do a hair transplant. Like I say, we've taken grafts from the back, we relocate them into an area where the follicles are inactive, so no hair's going to grow from those areas. The ones we implant, you know, if implanted successfully, they are not going to thin in the future. We're not worried, like hair loss treatment is not about protecting those. But if you don't do if you don't use hair loss treatment, all that's going to happen is the original hairline is going to continue to recede. and the original crown is going to continue to open up. So we call the original hair on the top of your head, we call that your native hair. So then we're using hair loss treatment to protect the native hair. So one of the content creators that I work with, we filmed his surgery in December just gone. So here's a perfect example. He had surgery, when we met it was 4 years beforehand, and he'd used no hair loss treatment. So he'd changed the position of his hairline, done nothing for sort of 3 or 4 years. He then had this old hairline had continued to recede. So he was missing patches here and here in the hairline. So we started off not just rushing into a second surgery. First of all, we started using the 360 Optimum hair products. He decided he didn't want to use hair loss medication. So because of the risk of side effects that you can get with both types, it was a choice that he would rather not use anything than use hair loss meds. So we started on the natural alternatives, and he had a great response. So we could see within, 6 months, that hair loss treatment plan was enough for him. So that was then easy to make a decision. If you have another surgery, we know this works for you. For some people, if the hair loss product's on their own, there's always going to be a few people that they're not strong enough for. So then we might increase, the treatment plan by introducing medications or laser therapy and PRP. So ideally, we want to get to that point before you've even had a hair transplant. Ideally, we want to get the hair loss stable first. It's very easy to document how well hair loss treatment is working for you before you've had the surgery, because after the surgery you kind of have to ignore the grafts. Like, let's ignore the transplant that's looking great, and we have to pick areas where it's going to be thinning next. So for this example with him, he then had these openings, got the hair loss stable, and then at some point we then did the surgery to correct the further receded hairline, but also we adjusted the shape of the hairline as well, because it was a bit odd, and direction of hair growth was not good either, so we've tried to sort of blend that in.
Yeah, okay. And with ongoing support, do you say, I know obviously that you offer the 360 Optimum hair products.
Yes.
Do you say that they should continue with PRP after as well?
Yeah, hair loss treatment forever. The reason, so if companies are just selling hair transplants, they don't talk about this. It puts people off booking.
The
minute you say you're going to have to start, using hair loss treatment, and if you don't, you're going to end up with a fringe, and your hair's going to recede behind it. And they go, I'll just have another hair transplant. You can't just keep having a hair transplant. Past a certain point, the surgeon will say no, because this area is over harvested. So you can only take so many grafts from the back before it looks patchy, and it would be unethical to create an unnatural pattern of hair loss. So you can't keep on going, because then they look butchered at the back. So, there are still places that over harvest. There's a few ways that can be done incorrectly. So if the hole punch isn't correct, the size of the hole punch, but also if they take them from like a small area. So say you've got the whole of the back of the head and they only take them from there. So like one of my patients comes for PRP, but he had a surgery done elsewhere years ago. He calls it his barcode on the back of his head, because he's got this one thin patch of hair. They took them all from a small space, but what you're meant to do is really spread them out. Take them as far apart as you can, depending on how many you're looking to take. So it's kind of even. Like, they are gone. They're gone forever. You are creating scarring, and you're trading a bit of density at the back for the top, but it should be done in as natural way as possible. So that's important. Another thing that's really important to understand that not a lot of people talk about either is the hair transplanted hairs will never grow as closely together as your natural hair grows. So you cannot place 2 grafts too close together, because there'll be a risk of them not healing or causing necrosis, which is really dangerous, like not dangerous, but really bad when it happens, because the skin turns black and loses blood supply, and it just permanently scars and it spreads like wildfire. So you have to kind of nip that in the bud. So you don't put them too close together. There has to be a safe distance apart, so each one has a really good chance of surviving. And if you know what you're looking for, you can see it. If the hairline's receded and we've built the temples, certain lighting, everyone at the minute wants to have this pushback hairstyle. It's one of the worst hairstyles for hair transplant surgery, because you're looking straight through the hairs, whereas when it's cropped forward or pushed over to the side, you're building layering. And the way the placement of the hair of the grafts are placed is to create an illusion of density. So the way they're staggered and the way they're positioned, with single hairs at the front building into 2s and 3s, it's all done in a way to create the maximum illusion of density, but you can't put them as close together as they'd naturally grow. So that's another reason the aim should always be to hold on to as much of your hair as possible. Don't like wait until you've gone bald and have a hair transplant.
I was just about to ask you, if somebody has, if say for instance they're an older gentleman, for instance, I mean, I know a lot of younger men now are shedding really early as well.
I've seen men in their 30s completely bald.
Yeah. Is it too late at that point?
We have to completely manage expectations. So some surgeons will not be keen to do a large surgery like that, not because it's difficult, because the worry is that the patient might not be pleased with the outcome, because they have to have really realistic expectations. If someone is basically bald, we will create a new hairline, and you don't go too low because you want to kind of spread the number of grafts that you've got to cover as large an area as possible. You would probably get mediocre density from the front of the hairline towards the crown. And then maybe if their donor can support it, which not everyone can. Let's say the first surgery we've done 4,000-5,000 grafts. It's a large surgery. Maybe the donor area can support a second one. But you're not going to have a thick full head of hair. It's going to be quite fine all over.
Yeah.
So that, the second surgery would fill in the crown and add a little bit more to the front. But that kind of patient, it's still life-changing. We've done a few over the years, and the surgeons just, with getting them to do an extra waiver to say they really do understand. And it's my job to really do a bit of a psychological assessment to check that they really are realistic with their expectations.
Yeah.
On the transplant on the crown as well, that will never look as full as their original hair, because the hairs are all growing outwards away from each other, and the direction of hair growth and the blood supply isn't as great to the crown as it is to the front. Most people will still want fibres. If they're looking for that perfection and that fullness, depending on how thick their natural hair is on the sides as well, and what we're trying to blend it in with.
Yeah.
A lot of people will use fibres as like a styling product to add to it, or they might get the scalp micropigmentation done onto the scalp to give an illusion. So with the best surgeons in the world, that's the case. People show before and afters in great lighting, really harsh lighting for the before and hardly any lighting on the second. But if you get the hair in the right lighting, or if it's wet, or if they use wet look products, it will separate it.
Yeah.
And you do see through it more than you would have done before your hair ever thinned. But as long as people understand that, so I'm not negative in a consultation, but I do make sure they understand what the possibilities are, and I will never overpromise.
Yeah.
Because then when it happens, they go, oh, okay, this is normal.
That's what they expected.
Yeah, and if they're saying, oh, I've seen these what do you think of this hair transplant? I'm like, yeah, great, it's not in good lighting. Or I can literally see there's fibres in the picture, or, so there's a lot of things I see in the industry still, which really annoys me after all this time, where people don't show true before and afters.
Or even I was looking to get my boobs done, and even you can see that they Photoshop people, and I'm like, that just makes me just not want to come to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't trust you.
It just is what it is.
Yeah.
I know. So just be, more open and transparent. Like sometimes I see, if we do any content with the 360 Optimum hair products, it always has to be mentioned if they've also had a hair transplant, or if they're also using minoxidil, or if they're also taking finasteride, because you need to manage expectations.
Yeah.
I see adverts popping up, because obviously my whole feed is on hair loss treatment, clearly, and it will be like an oil, and they will literally show somebody pre-hair transplant. They will show someone that's 100% had a hair transplant. There is no way it's possible for the hairs to have grown without it. And they're like, this is my red light cap, like LEDs as well, not even laser.
Yeah.
Here's my red light cap, or here's this oil I've been using. And I'm always like, but it's a hair transplant. Fine, say it was part of the aftercare of surgery.
They're not transparent, are they?
No. So I get people that ask me all the time, and they're like, send photos that, I've been using this and I saw these results, and I'm just like, they've had a hair transplant.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
It is crazy. I do think that should be
not allowed.
And, for instance, before when people put filters on Instagram, it never used to say that there was a filter on there.
True. Yeah,
now
terrible.
it says, doesn't it? So you should have to really specify that you've done that.
Yeah, exactly that.
So for instance, men that aren't necessarily shedding now, but they know that eventually they will. It's bound to happen to, I'd say, majority of men.
Yeah.
Would you suggest to them to start... How would you suggest for them to start their hair loss treatment if they're not worried about it at the moment? But
so treating hair loss early is key. Like if it's a top priority for them, start with the natural products. Like you're not introducing medications, you're not going to have any unwanted side effects. it's just a routine. You wash your hair anyway, hopefully.
Yeah.
I get a lot of people actually saying, I just use water. And I'm just like, well, that's gross.
Yeah.
And the scalp isn't cleansed. Water doesn't strip away oil.
All in one, like shampoo, conditioner,
even worse.
shower
I don't know
gel.
what's worse, actually. Just
I'd rather-
water or like is it called Radox?
Yeah.
I don't know what's worse. That's then just completely stripping the scalp and turning the hair into straw. There are other products. Some shampoos are like that as well. Just treating it early. So you can usually build a bit of a picture. So it does come down to a genetic disposition normally. So you would normally see in the family history, all the men have gone thin, say in their 20s or 30s or their 50s, 60s, 70s. Mm-hmm. You can sometimes see it in the women as well. So if the women have all thinned in the peri or post-menopause as well, that's another key time for hair loss. So that's when it's like a genetic disposition, because it's how sensitive those receptors are. Mm-hmm. So we've all got varying levels of these male and female hormones in our body. So whether a man goes bald in their 20s or their 70s, it's not like, the one in their 20s has got loads more testosterone, because it's the testosterone that converts to DHT. Mm-hmm. It's how sensitive the receptors are. If it's all natural, that is. I'm just going to backtrack slightly. If they take anything to increase their testosterone, that is a different story, because the more testosterone they've got, there are lots of different forms of steroids, but anything that boosts testosterone you have more available to convert to dihydrotestosterone, and that's what causes it to them.
Right, okay.
So I have a lot of bodybuilding patients, because obviously, when they're in those competitions, due to the steroids and testosterone they take, it advances the hair loss. So it was going to happen anyway. You've just brought it forward by 20 years, perhaps, by cycling, these things often. You can build a bit of a picture looking at your family history. Also, if there's any medical conditions going on, so if there's anything thyroid-related, vitamin deficiencies, if someone's stressed all of the time, again, they're going to be bringing it forwards. Yeah. And, most people will notice an increase in shedding once or twice a year. So like we've just come through like a time for seasonal shedding. Mm-hmm. September, October, really common, and spring as well. So, that can be normal. But if you start noticing an increase in shedding all of the time, and just normally by the time someone notices areas where you can see through to the scalp, they've lost 40% density by that point. So you're actually much better off. Some people are like, I'm probably wasting your time today. I just thought I would check I'm not going crazy. I'm like, no, you've done the right thing. This is easier to treat now. If you wait until everyone can see you're thinning, you would have probably lost 40 to 50% of your hair by then.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's harder to get back. Can we get the whole 50% back again? Maybe not. It depends how many follicles have become inactive in that time. So, and how quick it's going as well. So I would absolutely suggest, these things are so easy to implement into the routine. Yeah. The shampoo is one aspect. Men aren't always that receptive to, applying a spray every day. But once you get used to it, it takes 30 seconds.
And some people use like hair products anyway, like a gel or a wax or whatever.
Exactly.
So it's just literally another
part the hair, spray
seconds,
it on, style your hair. Absolutely. And then, the capsules, they've got like nutritional support for accelerated hair growth. But for men and, for women with hormonal issues, the saw palmetto is really key in just, stopping the thing causing the hair loss in the first place. Yeah. So always treat early.
Definitely. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a really insightful episode. I feel like we've all had a science lesson. And ladies, if your partners are experiencing thinning and, they're getting more self-conscious about it, make sure that you show them the second half of this episode, because it's really, really interesting, and to know that they're not alone out there as well. And as we've said, it's such a common misconception that men shouldn't go and get anything done and they should just, age gracefully. But why should they when us women are having all our tweakments,
There's an option there, so why not?
Definitely. So do you want to let everyone know where they can find you if they want to book in or if they have any questions?
Yes, so 360hairclinic.co.uk is the clinic. My handles are, so TikTok is @thathairlossexpert. Instagram is @360hairclinic. And then for the products, 360optimumhair.co.uk. And for the Instagram, @360optimumhair.
There we go. Thank you so much, Sophie, for coming on. And guys, make sure that you're following us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube @Mummahood The Podcast. Leave a review on whatever platform that you're listening to us on. And I'll see you same time next week. Love you. Bye.